Today, here will be held webinar, Effective Research Data Management by using International Repository Figshare. At start, I will give some little practical information. So please mute your microphone. You are welcome to use the chat box for questions. This event will be recorded, so if you don't want to appear in the recording, please turn off your webcam. And the recording will be made available as soon as possible on the YouTube channel of the Library of the University of Latvia. Now, with the greatest pleasure, I will give the word to our guest, Andrew McKenna-Foster, product specialist at Figshare, with over 12 years of experience working with research and archival data. Please, Andrew, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Ita. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I will share my screen.
Yes, please.
Fantastic. And please let me know if you can't see that.
Yes, we can see, yes.
Wonderful. So, yes, thank you for that introduction. And I must say, my co-presenter, Maria Kotera, cannot be here today. She is sad about that and hopes to be part of future events. But I do want to just say thank you again. This is wonderful. Thank you for putting on this event for Open Access, International Open Access Week. I am excited to be talking with you about Figshare and open data in general. And I'm going to talk for just a few minutes with some slides. And then I'm going to spend most of the time giving you a live demo of how to use Figshare to share research outputs like open data. Of course, I just kind of mentioned this, but I do want to give a quick background of open data in general and the FAIR principles. Some of you watching this may already know all about this stuff, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. And then I'll do a quick introduction of Figshare as a company and our parent company, Digital Science. And then, as I mentioned, spend the rest of the time talking about how you can use Figshare. So I'm planning on talking for about 30 to 35 minutes and then leaving the rest of the time for questions. So why share data openly and responsibly? There are lots of reasons. Here are several. One, funding agencies, publishers have open data policies that are increasingly expanding. So to be in compliance with your publisher or your funder, you may need to be sharing your data, or at least thinking about how you can share it. Another great reason to share responsibly is transparency and reproducibility. So you can increase the transparency of your work, can increase the reproducibility of your research. Just as an example, in the last couple of years, here's an example of where open data would have really helped. I used to study spiders in ecology, and so this spider researcher apparently seems to have been just making up data, and it's really affected all of his co-authors and collaborators, and everybody's had to do a huge amount of work to repair the damage from this basically faked data that appears to have happened. Open data, having to share that data openly would have perhaps made this not an issue. Couple other reasons. You can get credit for all of your work by sharing data, so not just the published research paper, but others can cite your actual data set. It can stand alone from a published paper. And then finally, perpetual findability. So you do all this work, you want it to be available far into the future, even when you're not around anymore. And it's sharing data in a way that's not responsible means that it's definitely not going to be perpetually findable. And what I mean by that is saying that data is available upon request, or putting data on just a website and saying it's available at this URL. At least that's something, but in 150 years, it may be difficult for someone to request that data from you, or that website may not be maintained anymore. So sharing data responsibly and openly is really important. But how do you do that? You follow the FAIR principles. These were published in 2016, and they stand for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So findable means there are digital object identifiers on your records. There's metadata that describes those records, and the records themselves are discoverable. Accessible is about it being free to access, and there are very few barriers to accessing that material, so people can just access it through the internet, through the web browser. Interoperable is all about the metadata being in a standard format so that machines and humans can understand it, and it can be translated into different indexes and searches. And the record itself is also linked to related research. And then finally, reusable is about having a license that tells people how they can reuse that work. And there's enough metadata to give context, to explain what this data is, where it came from, what are the assumptions in the data, so that it's actually reusable. And there are lots of resources out there to help you make your data sets fair. You can search, Go Fair or How to Fair are just two examples of sites that give a lot of good suggestions and details around the FAIR principles. One of the easiest ways to make your data and other outputs fair is to use a repository. And of course, you first look for a disciplinary repository like GenBank for genomic data. But oftentimes there isn't a disciplinary repository for your particular work or discipline. And that's when you turn to a generalist repository, which is what Figshare is. And so I'm going to spend the rest of the talk talking about Figshare. First, a quick, where did Figshare come from? Repositories are relatively new, just within the last 10 to 12 years, especially when we're talking about data repositories. And that's true with Figshare. So Mark Hanel founded Figshare in 2010 and then officially in 2012. So we're 10 years old this year. Mark was a PhD student, needed to share research outputs related to his papers. He wanted to be able to point to them from the papers and put them somewhere where he could cite them and others could find them. And there was nowhere to do that. So here's some of the figures that he was sharing that are part of his stem cell biology research, and they're still on Figshare today. So Mark started a website, others started using it, and it's grown into a global repository that anyone can use. So now, as you'll see a little bit later, you can use Figshare to share large file sets of images, file sets of a variety of different types, spreadsheets, text, code, images, videos, media, sound, anything that might support the conclusions of your research and that others might want to reuse and cite. You can use Figshare to do that. Figshare is part of a larger company, Digital Science. Digital Science nurtures companies that work within the research lifecycle, and so you see some of those logos are here. You may recognize some of them, or you may even use some of them, whether through your university or personally. So Overleaf is a LaTeX editor. Altmetric tracks attention across the internet. For digital objects, if you tweet about something, Altmetric can track that and show that. Just going to check the chat here. Oh, great. Thank you for sharing the website there. But the main goal here for Digital Science is to make research more efficient. The days are not getting any longer. It's, we all have so much to do. But also increase access to research outputs around the world. And I think that's really important. And I think, as you'll see, is something that Figshare does really well. And this is all done by just providing tools for both researchers and the administrators. So looking specifically at Figshare, this platform is really a universe of repositories. There's Figshare.com, which Geeta shared the link in the chat. This is where you can sign up as an individual researcher for a free account and begin sharing your research outputs. Universities and research institutions, governments and funders, publisher companies, pharma companies can license the Figshare platform and create their own repository that's branded, that has custom metadata, that has a bunch of administrative reporting features. No matter what, all of these repositories can be searched through one interface. So currently there's 6.5 million research objects out there. There are over 500,000 users around the globe using Figshare to share their work. So zooming in on this search image here, this is the search page. Once again, you can just go to Figshare.com and you can and click on the little search box at the top and you'll see this page. So lots of results out there. At the bottom left, you can see where these outputs are coming from. So publisher repositories. Oftentimes, if you submit a manuscript for publication, you'll see something in there in the process where they say you should make your data available. You can use our repository or you can use your own repository options. Oftentimes, that publisher repository is a Figshare repository, and that's where a lot of this is coming from. Universities have a lot of outputs here as well. And then the Figshare.com line down here are the individual researchers. And together, everyone is sharing a lot of different types of outputs. So figures like images, data sets, journal contributions, like open access versions of papers, media, theses. You can see the variety of things that are available through this generalist repository platform. So how does Figshare help with the FAIR principles? Just by using Figshare, you really have taken care of almost all of the requirements or practices for making outputs fair. So Figshare does all of this for you. It lets you type in metadata in a standard way. It provides a DOI. It makes your research discoverable. And this leaves you to do the hard work of actually curating your data, documenting it, making sure that it's actually going to be reusable. And I always try to plug the librarians at your institution who can help you do this in a way that your data set's going to be citable and reusable into the future. So I encourage you to, if you don't have a Figshare account, to just sign up. Just go to Figshare.com. All you really need is put in your last name, an email, and think of a great password. That's all you need to start an account and start sharing. I also highly recommend, if you don't have one already, to create an ORCID for yourself. So these are basically a persistent identifier for you as a researcher, helps distinguish you and your work out there. And you can link, as you'll see, the ORCID account with the Figshare account, and then ORCID will have a nice complete documentation of your research outputs all in one place. It will pull anything you put on Figshare, it'll pull in to your ORCID profile. So what does this all look like in the wild? So I've opened up a couple tabs up here, and I'll open up more. This is Figshare.com. This is the home page. And if you click the search into the search box or click the magnifying glass, we can just see the search page. It'll take a second to load with my internet connection. Once again, though, you can see all the results and the facets down the side. And the theme of Open Access Week is climate justice. So I'm going to just search for that term. So we have 214 results. I'm going to do a little bit of narrowing. So I want to see things just from Figshare.com, and I want to see data sets. So there are 3 data sets shared by individual researchers that have climate justice somewhere in the metadata. And I want to show you what one of these data sets looks like, and we can assess how fair it is. So I'll open up this middle one. Now, of course, I've done this, I practiced this, so I happen to know this is a great example. We see a bunch of spreadsheets shared here, and we can view these spreadsheets individually. We can view the first 50 lines of each of the tabs within this Excel spreadsheet. Really nice way to be able to evaluate what these data look like before downloading the files. Really importantly, though, we have all this metadata, and this is actually an excellent record. I was really impressed that they did such a good job filling out the metadata here. As I mentioned, Figshare provides the DOI. So when we click this Cite button, we see the DOI now attached to this record, which makes this persistently available and findable far into the future. And Figshare also will give you a citation that you can format in many, many different ways, depending on what your need is. But the metadata is excellent. We see the authors here, a really comprehensive description, which is fantastic. It goes all the way down the bottom here. We see the license, so we know how we can reuse this. A lot of keywords for discoverability, categories, and then Figshare will track the metrics as well for this record. So this is excellent for you as an individual researcher to understand how people are talking about your research and using your research. In this case, the authors cited this record in a publication, and I can see that because of this citation count. If I click that, it opens up Dimensions. Dimensions is another digital science product, and so we're able to have this nice integration where we can look up in the Dimensions database anything that uses a DOI from Figshare. So we see that there's this publication that cites this data set. Going back to the record, we also have an integration with Altmetric, so we can see how this record has been talked about. There we go, my mouse can hover on it now. And clicking on this, so this record was published in 2015. You can see that right here. Clicking on that Altmetric badge takes us to the Altmetric page that shows us the details. And once again, this is just built in with Figshare. So we can see the news items. This was published in 2020. So 5 years after that data set was published, it was mentioned in a news site as well as a blog site. And then I think the tweet is from 2016. So, really interesting to see that this was out there and it was actually picked up many years later and used. So that can be very useful for the author and the author's institutions as well. I'm going to close those. Just as an example, so this is an excellent record, very fair. I'll show an example of maybe some not so fair records. We can search particular metadata fields in Figshare. So I'm going to search the title for, as you might imagine, dataset.xlsx. So a title for your data set, if it's going to be truly fair, it should be descriptive. Data set is not the most ideal title to use. And you can see here that there are a lot of records out here that we just don't have any idea what's going on with them. So I'll click into one and just see if it's, so they at least put a description in here. That's good. And some keywords. So overall, not too terrible, but a nicer, more descriptive title would be very useful here. Okay, so I want to show you what it looks like to upload a record in Figshare. And this is going to be true if, what I'm going to show you is true if you are using it as a free account or your institution uses Figshare for their repository. Now, I've already logged in and I've logged into my personal account. I'm going to go to my data. So this is what everybody sees, even administrators who have administrator accounts in a repository. We see the records that we own. Some are public. You can see I have some draft records in here. In free Figshare accounts, you can store up to 20 gigabytes of files privately. Once you publish them, then you get that space back and you can upload another 20 gigabytes if you want to do that. Projects are a collaborative space, which I'll talk about briefly in a moment. Collections are where you can group records from across Figshare together to do a meta-analysis or whatever you like. So I want to show you what it looks like to upload a record. I'm going to create a new item here. And we can see that we can drag and drop files into this record. We can also make it a metadata only record, if that made sense to do that. Or maybe the files are stored somewhere else online and you want to link to them. You want to use Figshare to provide a DOI for that data set, and you can do that as well. I got to move my zoom out of the way. To drag and drop files, I don't think you can see this, but I have, I'll just drag a few files in there. I'll just drag an image and a spreadsheet in there. Generally, you can drag and drop up to 5 gigabytes in a browser. I'll show you how you can upload much larger files. The title, as we mentioned, should be very descriptive, especially if this is supporting a paper. You might want to say data for, and then the title of your work. It'll automatically add you as an author. You can add other authors. Maybe I want to add Mark Hannell. Now, Mark has several accounts in different Figshare repositories that are out there. So it's helpful to kind of, figure out which one I want to use there. You can also just add authors. So if they don't show up in this list, they don't already have an account somewhere, you can just add their name and they'll just show up in your list of authors. Categories come from a controlled vocabulary to make it a little easier to search across the Figshare universe. So we can choose whatever makes the most sense here. You can choose multiple categories if you want. Selecting the item type is required. Everything with a green dot is required. And it's very important to click on the little info tab here to understand what is meant by each of these. Figshare had to choose to how to classify these objects. So it's good to try to make the objects to match your data sets or outputs, your files with the right one. So figures are generally images. Media is generally, videos. Data sets could be a lot of things, and so on. So you choose what the right record. I'm actually not going to choose one, so I don't accidentally publish this. Keywords, it's good to have, at least 5 keywords. Try to choose terms that others might search your work by, alternative words that might be searched. Maybe you want to put in terms from different languages, but as you start typing, it will search the current database, what other people have added, and you can choose from that or just type your own keywords in. It's free text entry. The description, of course, should also be, as we saw, as descriptive as possible. If you already have an abstract, you can paste that in. You can also do some formatting to make this easier for people to see. I'll zoom in a little bit. You can type out whatever you like. You can also put links in here. You can link this directly to wherever you need to link to. And as I scroll down, you can also put your funding in, which is also really useful. If you might be able to you can type in your own grant information. But as you can see, Figshare also searches the Dimensions database for grant records that it has. And it has grants from around the world, as you can see. So you can type in the grant name, you can type in your grant number, and it's always good to really check and see if you have if a grant is there that you can link to. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like in a moment. You can add multiple grants. Importantly, as I mentioned, for interoperability, that part of FAIR is to reference related research. So you might put in here a link to a related paper, a related data set, more information. Coming soon is the ability to add context to these references to say that, this link is supported by this data set record. Licenses are very important and often very confusing for researchers. Figshare, the free Figshare accounts offer open licenses because we're trying to encourage open access to material. If you use Figshare at an institution, you may see other licenses. Institutions can customize what licenses are there, even copyright license or more restrictive Creative Commons licenses. In general, though, the absolute best license to use is CC0. It just makes, basically for frictionless reuse far into the future, it allows others to use your work as they need to. But the very most common one probably that people use is the CC BY, which just says that you can do whatever you want basically, but you must cite the authors. And in general, it's standard practice to cite where information is coming from. So that's, the CC0 is generally great to use. A couple other things here. Actually, I should mention, you can edit the timeline. This is something that people often don't realize. If you have something that has a date on it and it's a date prior to the date that you're entering this information, you can click this little edit timeline and you can change that date if you want. So a little pro tip there if you need to. Figshare will track, though, when it was first published on Figshare. Oops. So scroll down here, a few other things. You can embargo these files. If you don't want something available immediately, you can embargo the entire content, all of it, or just the files until a calendar date or for a certain amount of time. And it's always good to give a descriptive reason why it's embargoed so that when people find your record, they understand why they can't access the files. Lastly, when you're going through the peer review process, it's very helpful to give the reviewers access to your data in an anonymous way. That's where this private link comes in. You must link your account to ORCID to have this private link option. I'll show how to do that in a moment. But this private link, now I can share this, and anyone with this link will be able to download the files that I've uploaded to this record. So it's a useful way to include with your manuscript so that the reviewers can see it. You can also reserve a digital object identifier, a DOI here. So you can include that in your paper in the data availability statement. And rather than saying data available upon request, you can say the data is available in this repository. Here's the DOI. So you can reserve that and put it in your paper during the review process. Really useful. Okay, so I'm keeping my eye on the time. This is how you enter the metadata. Once you've filled in all the green boxes, you will be able to click the publish button. It says I haven't filled it all in yet. But once I do that, I could click publish and save, and my record would then be public. Important to note, the only way to remove the record is to contact Figshare because we want to maintain, integrity of these scientific outputs. So really, check everything, and then when you're ready, publish it. If you do make a mistake, you can actually publish new versions. So I'm going to cancel this. I don't need this anymore. I could version, this record that I've published. I can edit it, and certain changes will then, when I publish, will create a new record. A new version. So you can version your records into the future. The last few things, if you need to upload a really large file, see there's a chat box. Oh, great. I see there's a question about Figshare versus Zenodo. I will cover that in just a moment. I can answer that question. It's a great question. I want to just mention, how do you move large files into Figshare? Under the application link, this is where we can link to GitHub, for example. This is where we'd link to our ORCID account. You can see I've done that. I've linked to my GitHub. GitLab, Bitbucket also have integrations. And there are FTP tool logins. So this is how you could move a bunch of files in all at once, or a really large file in. If you are programmatically inclined, you can also create a personal token and use that with the two-way open API. So there are lots of ways to work with Figshare. programmatically. The last thing I'll just mention here is your profile. My profile is linked to ORCID. You can put in some information, and I should put in some biographical information maybe, and some publications. And I'm going to scroll down and just show the view public profile. This is what your profile ends up looking like. It'll show your metrics, your collaborators, and all the outputs that you've shared. So a really nice way to have a profile in Figshare. And once again, this will connect with ORCID. Okay, the last thing I want to mention, project spaces, I think are really useful for individual researchers. This is a place where you can privately work together before making things public. I'm using projects right now actually to work with some collaborators where we have a database of plant sightings in an area. So we're using that to kind of work together on this file. My collaborators have added these files. I can view them. I can leave notes on those records if I want to. When we're ready, we could publish these records directly from the project. We could publish the project itself to give even more information about what we've been working on. There can be public and private records in here. So just a quick overview of just to say, I think projects are really useful, really good to use. So before I get to some of the, at least that one question, I do want to just mention, what does it look like if your institution is using Figshare? So what I've really just showed you is the free version. From the researcher perspective, if your institution uses Figshare, you would see more metadata options within the record, and everything would be branded for your institution, which can be very good because it gives more credibility to the records. Not only is it coming from you, maybe you're well known in your field, but someone can also see that it's coming from your university. So here are a few examples. This is the University of Loughborough's landing page for their repository. They use it for everything. We can see some statistics from their page. I'll just show a data set from Loughborough here. So they also have organized their outputs into groups, which we can see here on the left in this facet. I'm going to open up. We can see what they're using it for. A lot of open access papers, theses, and dissertations. So I'll go to data set since we are talking about data today. And so some are embargoed here. There's a lot of supplementary information. Let's see, I think I'll go to this record here just to show an example of what the record can look like. So the record itself is branded with Loughborough's logo. As I scroll down, the logo is down here as well. This is one of the extra fields that universities have to link to, to kind of highlight the link to a published version of a paper. As I scroll down, we see that they've added a few custom fields, unit, research unit, and school. This record is nice too because I think a curator may have helped the researchers. That's the other benefit, is there's a review process for the university. So they can help make sure that, for example, funding is linked. So we can see this is that where they chose a grant from that dropdown. When we click here, we can see the grant information in the Dimensions database and get much more information about who else might be receiving this funding, other related grants, etc. So those are some of the benefits when the university is using Figshare for their repository. And just a couple other examples: University of Cape Town, South Africa, Ziva Hub use it primarily for data sets as well. Singapore Management University is also another example. There are over 75 universities around the world using Figshare, and in addition, government agencies and research organizations, etc. So I want to answer some of that question. So the question that was asked in the chat is, what are the advantages, disadvantages of Figshare in comparison to Zenodo or other companies or repositories? And I of course, can't speak for other repositories. I have actually used Zenodo in my personal life. Before I was at Figshare, I actually had used both platforms. I shared my first data set on Figshare, but I've used Zenodo extensively as well. And, I think that every repository, all these repositories are slightly different in how they do things. Figshare prioritizes the preview ability. So we preview over 1,200 file types directly in the browser to try to make research outputs even more understandable, more engaging, and more reusable in that way. Figshare also handles extremely large files. So there are options if you have a 1 terabyte file set or file that you need to upload, Figshare can do that for you. And I think that's pretty difficult on many other platforms. Not all platforms allow you to integrate with ORCID really easily. Figshare does that. I believe Zenodo links well with ORCID as well, but not all platforms can do that. So those are a few examples. It might just be personal preference too. You should try out the repositories. But I will say both Figshare and Zenodo offer free accounts for researchers to start using. So I personally have accounts in both. I guess since I'm on it, I'll just go to one other difference. I showed you the projects and collections. Zenodo does things a little differently as well. It has other ways you can kind of package things together. So those are some of the differences. So I think I will end there and leave it for questions. Thank you again for attending this webinar. If you do have questions into the future, please feel free to email me. And I think Maria would also feel the same way if you have questions. If your library has questions about Figshare, using Figshare as a repository for your university, please put them in touch with us. We're happy to answer questions around that as well. So looks like we got another. Oh, great. Yes, you're welcome for the answer. And I should say, so if there are more questions, please either, I guess, unmute or put them in the chat. I will mention that we can look up public profiles on the back end based on email domain. There are a few accounts from Latvian universities, but not much has been shared yet. However, there may be many other folks just using third-party emails, like a Gmail account or something, and we wouldn't really know if where they are in the world in that case. But I will say that we have users from around the world, and so I hope that you look through Figshare in your discipline, look for folks in your research networks, and see what they're sharing. But happy to answer questions.
I have one question. When you show how to make the metadata record, there was option metadata record only. In what cases it is used?
That's a great question. So you may, I know some folks have used this for physical samples. So, if you have a physical sample, you could create a metadata record for it. I think many times people might take a picture of it, of that object and upload that, but you could just have just the metadata for it. I think that's the biggest use. There are probably many others. Maybe the file there's no link to it. It can't sit on the internet. It has to sit on your own, I don't know, your own server, but you still want a record of it. There's nothing to upload. So that would be another use case there.
For example, it could be that the research data are in another repository and person just want here to make metadata and link to this other story. Could it be like that?
That's a possibility. I think that, so every record that you make public will get a DOI. And if that record is already in a repository, hopefully it already has a DOI. I will say there are ways to create records with an existing DOI. You have to use the API for that. through the interface, and we have some information about that on our help site. So I'd say in that specific case, if a record already has a DOI, the better thing would be to reference it in the references, especially if you're uploading things that are complementary. If you needed, I'm just thinking through the process here, if it was in some type of online repository, but it didn't have a DOI, then yes, that would be a good use. You could basically move the files into Figshare, give them a DOI, and then you could reference that original location through the references. So there are lots of options. As you can see, there's usually not a, there are usually multiple ways to do this responsibly. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, yes. Well, I have heard that it is such a kind of practice that people are making metadata records in their institutional repositories, but physically they are in some subject repositories, and then they are making some kind of links.
Oh, sure. Sure, yeah. And
how,
I think
how it is often this practice, I don't know, but I have heard that it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. So a university repository, as I mentioned, there's universities using Figshare at least have the option to add more metadata fields down here. So they have a little more control over that. So they can make it really clear and say, like, this record is in this disciplinary repository. We have a copy in our own repository, and they can upload, I'll just, since we're on it, this is the documentation for the Figshare API, and you can actually, I'm sorry that this is, I want to create a new private article. So I can upload information into Figshare, including a DOI. I know this is a little hard to see, but so I can take that DOI or persistent identifier from that disciplinary repository, create a copy of all the metadata, and then put it in my own, institutional repository. Yes, so that is something that you could do.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So maybe somebody have some more questions in the chat. There is no.
And that's okay. If questions come up later, please email. And I hope folks try it out. Try creating a Figshare account, connect it to your ORCID, start sharing your research outputs.
Thank you very much for your brilliant speech, Andrew. So event is over. Thank you all for coming to this webinar, and I will send this presentation as well as link to the video recording to all participants by email. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.